The palace gates were still closed when the royal convoy quietly slipped through. No public address, no formal ceremony, just a private, urgent meeting behind locked doors. And then, with a signature that defied every royal precedent, King Charles handed over key military titles not to William, not to Anne, but to young Princess Charlotte. What was once tradition was now rebellion cloaked in royal velvet. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The night before, London had slept in its usual uneasy calm, unaware that history was already being rewritten in silence. Inside the palace, corridors that had witnessed centuries of ritual felt heavier, as if even the walls sensed that something irreversible was unfolding. Senior aides moved quickly, whispering in tight circles, some in disbelief, others in quiet dread, because this was not how things were meant to happen. Military insignias, long tied to lineage and seniority, were suddenly being detached from expectation and placed on the shoulders of a child who, until that moment, had been shielded from the full weight of royal power. Charles, seated behind his desk, appeared composed, yet those close to him spoke of a deeper tension, an internal war between duty, legacy, and something far more personal. Outside, the regiments tied to these titles carried histories older than many nations, their banners woven with stories of loyalty, sacrifice, and unbreakable tradition, and now they were bound to Princess Charlotte, in a move that left both supporters and critics stunned. Some aides later admitted they had only learned of the decision minutes before it was finalized, scrambling to manage a situation that had blindsided even the most seasoned palace strategists. Meanwhile, murmurs of long simmering tensions between Charles, William, and Princess Anne resurfaced with renewed intensity, suggesting that this moment had not emerged from nowhere but from months, perhaps years, of unspoken conflict. William, as heir, had always been expected to inherit such honours, while Anne's lifelong service had made her a natural custodian of military symbolism, yet both were bypassed in a single, decisive stroke. Charlotte, young yet remarkably poised, stood at the centre of this storm, her age amplifying the shock, while her presence carried an unexpected, almost magnetic authority that left many wondering whether she had been prepared for this far longer than anyone realised. The handover felt less like a ceremonial gesture and more like a calculated declaration, a message to the family, the nation, and the armed forces that the future of the monarchy was being reshaped in ways few could predict. Beneath the surface, alliances trembled, loyalties were questioned, and the delicate balance of royal power began to tilt. In that fleeting moment, tradition cracked, ambition stirred, and the monarchy stepped into a new, uncertain era, where every move would be scrutinized, every silence interpreted, and every relationship tested. And as the last echoes of that private meeting faded into the palace walls, it became clear that this was only the beginning of something far deeper and far more dangerous. But to understand why this stunning move happened in secret, we must peel back the layers of growing unrest inside the royal inner circle. Legacy is everything in the House of Windsor, but lately, it's also become a battlefield. Charles had promised loyalty to William and Anne, but his latest move shattered decades of alignment. What conversations unfolded in the palace corridors that convinced the king to bypass them both? For months, tensions had been growing beneath the surface, subtle, unspoken, but impossible to ignore. Charles, torn between upholding the strict lineage of military tradition and defining a legacy that would outlast his reign, found himself caught in a storm of conflicting loyalties. William, the heir apparent, had long prepared for such roles, his life moulded by the shadow of duty. Anne, respected by the armed forces and the public alike, had earned her standing not through privilege but through relentless service, yet neither received the honours. Instead, Charles broke from the expected and made a move no one could predict. Behind closed doors, Camilla's influence was becoming undeniable. Trusted sources confirm she was one of the few consistently present in Charles's private briefings leading up to the decision. Their conversations, some reportedly lasting late into the night, circled around legacy, perception, and power. Camilla, ever strategic, is believed to have urged Charles to think not just of today, but of the symbolic weight such a gesture would carry for generations. Charlotte, young yet already a darling of the public, represented a rare convergence of innocence and power, heritage and modernity. In her, the monarchy could project both stability and evolution. For Charles, that mattered perhaps more than anything else. He had watched his own approval wax and wane over the years. He knew legacy was not earned solely through bloodline, but through boldness. But in making this choice, Charles also made a gamble, and some say a betrayal. William was reportedly informed after the fact, leaving him blindsided and quietly furious. The same titles his father had once hinted would eventually be his were now in the hands of his daughter. The symbolism was impossible to ignore. William, who had spent years forging relationships within the military, saw those honours redirected in a move that spoke volumes about the king's shifting priorities. And Princess Anne, who had sacrificed personal comfort and recognition to uphold her role as the monarchy's quiet backbone, was once again overlooked silently, deliberately, and without explanation. For those closest to the late Queen Elizabeth, it was a moment of reckoning. Her meticulously drawn succession strategies now seemed to be unraveling, replaced by a new vision shaped by urgency and emotion. This was no longer just about titles, it was about control. It was about who shapes the future of the monarchy when the Queen is gone, when the King is aging, and when the next generation is still being formed. In placing these honours on Charlotte's shoulders, Charles wasn't just reassigning power, he was redrawing the family map of loyalty, legacy, and lineage. And while those outside the palace walls remained unaware, inside, the fault lines were beginning to split open. And while the nation watched silently, the youngest royal to ever hold a command was quietly being prepared for a role no one saw coming. It wasn't just a ceremonial gift. Unknown to many, Princess Anne has been training Charlotte for months in private, away from media, behind the palace walls. The hardest working royal may have quietly transferred her grit and discipline to the youngest royal prodigy. This was no accident of affection, no casual bonding between aunt and niece. It was deliberate. Anne, long regarded as the embodiment of duty and resilience, had grown quietly disillusioned with how Charles was steering the monarchy. His recent decisions, cloaked in secrecy, driven by sentiment, had left her questioning not only the future, but who was truly ready to lead it. In Charlotte, she saw something rare. Not just curiosity, but resolve. A quiet strength that reminded her of a time when royal children were expected to rise, not simply smile. Away from the public gaze, Anne began shaping her. Mornings began earlier. Conversations grew heavier. Lessons weren't about table manners, they were about history, hierarchy, and the burden of command. These sessions, held in the stillness of Windsor's private corridors, carried echoes of something far more intentional. Anne was doing more than mentoring, she was shaping a successor. Not in the traditional sense, but in the way that mattered most to her: values, toughness, clarity. She taught Charlotte the unspoken weight of insignias, the purpose behind each regiment, the honour buried beneath royal ceremony. It was preparation disguised as tradition, discipline masked as bonding. Those close to Anne began to notice a subtle shift in her public tone, cryptic remarks about true service, and preparing them early that once seemed innocuous now rang with new meaning. Behind the curt nods and tight-lipped smiles, Anne had made her choice. Not for the throne, but for the legacy. And Charlotte, despite her youth, responded in kind. What began as questions turned into certainty. She absorbed the stories, the strategy, the burden. When asked by palace staff why Charlotte seemed more focused, more serious, they had no answer. But Anne did. She knew that in a family where power was often seized through silence, preparation was the loudest act of rebellion. Her mentorship was not just a gift, it was a challenge to the system itself, a quiet protest against decisions being made by Charles behind closed doors. If he would bypass Anne and William without warning, then she would bypass tradition in return by readying someone younger, sharper, and unburdened by old rivalries. A girl not yet tainted by expectation, but already destined for scrutiny. This unspoken alliance between Anne and Charlotte was beginning to shift the balance. It wasn't forged with titles or ceremonies, but through something stronger, trust, and a shared understanding that duty must be earned, not inherited blindly. In this hidden apprenticeship, Anne had not just passed on her values, she had declared, in the most silent but resounding way, that Charlotte was ready. Perhaps not for now, but for something soon approaching. And the moment Charles placed those military titles on Charlotte's name, it confirmed what Anne had feared and anticipated, that her private rebellion had met a public reckoning. But while Anne was training a future commander, Charles was rewriting royal protocol behind his son's back. When Prince William learned of the decision, it wasn't from the king. It was from a palace staffer. Sources confirm he stormed out of the private council, demanding answers. Was this a warning sign that even the heir apparent is losing control? The news hit him like a calculated strike, swift, sharp, and completely unexpected. He hadn't been briefed. No meeting, no memo, not even a whispered heads-up. In a family governed by hierarchy and protocol, this was more than just a lapse. It was a message, one that left William reeling. Those close to him say his face shifted instantly from confusion to disbelief, and then to something much darker. Betrayal. The kind that lingers, reshaping trust into suspicion. The kind that doesn't just challenge a role, it challenges identity. For years, William had believed he was next in line not just for the crown, but for the stewardship of tradition. He'd been groomed to lead, not sidelined in silence. And yet, in a matter of hours, power had moved not to him, but to his daughter. What unfolded behind palace doors was more than a family disagreement, it was a fracture. A direct rupture between father and son that exposed the uneasy balance between modern monarchy and personal ambition. William had long envisioned a reign that blended tradition with renewal. But Charles's decision, carried out without consultation, spoke to something more unilateral, something that echoed with control, secrecy, and perhaps fear. Insiders suggest this wasn't the first time Charles had made moves without William's input, but it was certainly the most personal. To be passed over in favor of Charlotte, his own child, was not just a challenge to his role, it was a challenge to his authority. And what made it worse was how little influence he seemed to have over the narrative now unfolding around him. Charlotte, once a figure of innocent affection in the public eye, had become a symbol, an emblem of the future, and one now detached from William's guidance. She was rising independently, framed not as his successor's successor, but as something else entirely. Her closeness with Anne, her favour with the king, even her growing confidence, none of it bore William's stamp. And that terrified him, because influence in the royal family isn't just about titles. It's about proximity, alliances, and symbolism. And Charlotte's new role meant William's grip was slipping, even as he stood at the brink of kingship. At the heart of it all stood Catherine, Princess of Wales. Caught between loyalty to her husband and pride for her daughter, she became the emotional fulcrum of a storm no one had prepared her for. Those who saw her that day described a woman holding the weight of two futures, one cracking, one rising, and neither fully in her control. While William wrestled with betrayal and political disempowerment, Catherine carried the emotional toll. The divide between father and son was no longer theoretical. It was real, and it was growing. But Charles wasn't acting alone. This move was part of a deeper plan, whispered by a surprising royal ally. She stood beside the throne, but now it seems she was guiding its very decisions. Camilla's hand in the military title transfer reveals a strategy that's been unfolding for months, a plan that protects Charles's legacy at any cost, even if it fractures the next generation. To those watching from the outside, Queen Camilla appeared composed, dutiful, supportive, but within the palace, she was something else entirely. A force of calculation, perception, and precision. In recent months, she had quietly positioned herself within key meetings, especially those involving military advisors and royal protocol officers. What appeared at first to be ceremonial interest was, in truth, a slow and deliberate insertion into the very heart of royal strategy. Camilla knew better than anyone that perception shapes power, and power, once shaped, could be controlled. She understood the fragility of Charles's reign and the brutal speed with which public opinion could turn. The monarchy was wounded, divided between generations, burdened by scandals and haunted by ghosts. In her view, it needed a new face, one untarnished, one emotionally magnetic, and most importantly, one she could influence without resistance. Her answer was Charlotte, not because of ambition or rivalry, but because of survival. Camilla had seen how public love could shield a royal figure. She had seen it in Diana, and now she saw it in Charlotte. In her, Camilla identified a perfect storm of innocence and symbolism. While William and Harry had become lightning rods for criticism, one too restrained, the other too rebellious, Charlotte remained untouched, above the political noise. And Camilla seized that. According to insiders, she began urging Charles to consider what placing public responsibility in Charlotte's hands could mean not just for tradition, but for legacy. She reminded him of how frail the monarchy appeared in moments of uncertainty, and how decisive action could change everything. The idea of giving military titles to a child would normally have been unthinkable, even laughable. But Camilla didn't approach it through the lens of tradition, she approached it through optics. And the optics, she argued, were powerful. A young royal entrusted with history, a fresh signal to the world that the monarchy was evolving. Those close to William say he was never consulted. Camilla had never enjoyed a warm relationship with him, and this move deepened the fracture. Some suggest her influence over Charles is strongest when William is distant. Others argue this was personal, a quiet sidelining of the next king in favor of a generation Camilla believed she could help shape. Regardless, the results were undeniable. Charlotte was elevated, William was enraged, and Charles, caught between the past and the future, chose the present strategy over familial unity. For Camilla, it was a win cloaked in strategy, one that pushed her further into the role of royal architect rather than bystander. With Harry's influence diminished and William increasingly isolated, Camilla had positioned herself as the only steady compass beside the king. But no plan is without consequence. In pulling Charlotte into the spotlight, Camilla had ignited something irreversible, for while she may have orchestrated the move, it was Charlotte who now bore the weight of its fallout. Yet while Camilla maneuvered behind closed doors, it was Princess Charlotte who stood at the center of a storm she didn't ask for. She stood silent as the title was handed to her. No tears, no celebration, just a quiet nod. But inside sources say Princess Charlotte was overwhelmed, even tearful, after the ceremony. Was this a child being honored, or being forced into a role no one prepared her for? Those in the room described an atmosphere so heavy it nearly crushed the silence. All eyes were on her, yet she barely met a single one. She didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't offer the innocent curiosity expected of someone her age. Instead, she accepted the titles with the kind of stillness that comes not from pride, but pressure. And behind that poised exterior, there was something trembling. Later that day, in the quiet of her mother's private sitting room, Charlotte is said to have broken down, asking questions no child should need to ask. Was this forever? Did she have to wear the titles always? Was she still allowed to say no? Catherine, hearing her daughter's fear cloaked in formality, was reportedly shaken, because while the world praised Charlotte's composure, only her mother could see the cost. There had been no rehearsal for this weight, no gentle introduction to what would now define her identity. The military honors she'd received were not empty medals, they were obligations stretching decades into her future. A future she hadn't chosen. In private, Charlotte has expressed that she feels like she's carrying something invisible, something too large for her shoulders. Though she doesn't fully grasp the centuries of tradition now resting on her name, she feels the shift, the expectations, the stares, the sudden absence of childhood normalcy. Her world, once filled with light lessons and quiet afternoons, has been overtaken by whispers of strategy, status, and scrutiny. Even her questions are now weighed, measured, interpreted through the lens of monarchy. Those who know the royal archives well have quietly drawn parallels between Charlotte and another young girl, who once found herself shouldering a legacy not meant for her Elizabeth. The resemblance is uncanny, not in features, but in fate. A young royal girl expected to step into roles before she could fully understand their cost. Charlotte's calm demeanor has only intensified those comparisons. But behind the calm, insiders say, lies uncertainty, a quiet resistance. A child whose innocence is being repurposed for narrative. She's been called a symbol of unity, a beacon for the future, but rarely, if ever, is she simply called a girl. The title handover may have lasted only minutes, but its impact will last a lifetime. In the days that followed, Charlotte's schedule changed. Her studies took on a more formal tone. Her appearances were more calculated. And yet, those close to her say she is still clinging to fragments of what she once was, books she loves, questions she still dares to ask, laughter she tries to hold on to. But the pressure is there, and it's growing. And those who placed the crown of duty upon her head must now answer for whether they gave her a future or stole a childhood. But while Charlotte wrestled with the weight of duty, the military world responded with a mix of praise and quiet outrage. Some called it visionary. Others called it a joke. Several retired military leaders have privately condemned the decision, questioning whether Charlotte's appointment undermines tradition and readiness. Behind palace smiles, resentment is growing in the ranks. The military, for all its ceremonial connections to the crown, is built on discipline, legacy, and earned command. And to many within its highest levels, the sudden announcement that a young royal child barely old enough to grasp the complexities of modern defense strategy would bear titles tied to centuries of military history felt like more than just a break from tradition. It felt like a breach. Public statements remained courteous, even supportive. But behind closed doors, unease took root. Some officers described it as a public relations stunt that cheapened the institution. Others feared it was a signal that symbolic image had finally eclipsed operational substance. One leaked memo revealed an unnamed commander writing that morale doesn't rise from symbolism, it rises from service. It was a sharp, quiet jab directed squarely at the palace. Even among the more traditionalist voices, who historically supported royal military appointments, there was confusion. Because this wasn't a role handed to an adult with public service experience or wartime contribution, it was given to a child. And while Charlotte herself was never blamed, the institution was now facing an uncomfortable question. Could a monarch's personal vision override centuries of structure? Historic comparisons were quickly unearthed cases where young royals were assigned honorary roles in wartime or peace. But every example came with controversy, public backlash, internal division, and in each case, the credibility of the military as a professional body had been momentarily destabilized. The balance between palace and barracks had always been delicate, bound together by loyalty, yet constantly navigating the divide between ceremony and combat. Now, that balance was tipping. Some feared this moment would set a dangerous precedent, that royal favor, not earned distinction, would define future appointments. The debate spilled into private officers' clubs and discreet gatherings at Sandhurst and beyond. Younger officers, especially those with active deployments, felt sidelined. To them, the move symbolized how far removed the monarchy had become from the realities of modern defense. The uniforms they wore represented sacrifice. Rank represented grit. And now, titles once earned through time and command had been draped over a royal child with no warning, no consultation, no vote. Yet the palace remained silent. No apology, no justification, only smiles, handshakes, and carefully worded press releases. The strategy was clear: control the optics, let the storm pass. But resentment, once seeded, does not vanish. It simmers, it waits, and it remembers. And while Charlotte remained shielded from the brunt of the fallout, those around her were beginning to understand that this decision would ripple far beyond the gilded halls of Buckingham Palace. The monarchy may have reshaped its image, but in doing so, it had shaken the very institution that once served as its proudest pillar. Still, the most shocking twist wasn't the handover itself, but what came after. a sealed letter left behind by the king, only to be opened in Charlotte's name. It was found in a private drawer marked only for "the commander after me." The letter, now locked in the royal archives, is said to contain Charles's personal vision for Charlotte's future as the monarchy's silent weapon, and its contents may never be made public. The discovery sent immediate ripples through the palace. Not because of what was inside, it remains unread, but because of what it meant. In the midst of a reign clouded by contradiction, Charles had penned something final. A sealed document addressed not to the next monarch, not to William, but to Charlotte. The weight of that gesture was seismic. Archivists confirm its existence, stored under tight classification, and only to be opened on a date yet unnamed, tied to a future military milestone that Charlotte has not yet reached. Until then, it sits untouched, watching, waiting, a symbol of a legacy deliberately passed in silence. Such letters are not without precedent. Queen Elizabeth left personal notes to her children in the days leading to major transitions. But this one is different. It bypasses the present line of succession. It breaks the linear rhythm of royal tradition. And more importantly, it speaks to something deeper: Charles's state of mind as he nears the twilight of his reign. Those close to him describe a man increasingly preoccupied with legacy, with permanence, with shaping history on his own terms. He had watched the House of Windsor fracture beneath scandal, modernity, and internal rivalry. And in Charlotte, he saw a reset. A vessel not yet tainted by controversy, not yet broken by expectation. A blank page upon which he could imprint the story he couldn't write for William, or Harry, or even himself. And so he wrote it, a letter, heavy with symbolism. Maybe it contains advice, maybe it warns of enemies within, maybe it maps out a vision of monarchy no one else has dared to suggest aloud. But what it certainly contains is burden, because this isn't just a note from grandfather to granddaughter. And Charlotte, the youngest to bear a title so historically loaded, now carries the weight of something she cannot read, yet is defined by. It's a paradox, a future shrouded in secrecy, and a child shaped by a letter she's not allowed to open. Inside the palace, whispers grow louder. Some speculate it's Charles's confession, a record of private doubts, regrets, or revelations too explosive for the public eye. Others say it outlines how Charlotte should respond when the monarchy is threatened again. A strategy for survival, a guide for transformation. Theories multiply, but the truth remains locked away. What is clear, however, is that this single envelope, hidden in plain sight, has now become the most guarded symbol of succession, power, and prophecy. In crafting this letter, Charles did more than leave instructions. He left a shadow. One that now follows Charlotte into every room she enters, every title she holds, every future choice she'll be expected to make. Whether she welcomes its guidance or resents its presence, it will define her. And as she grows into the role that others have chosen for her, one truth becomes increasingly inescapable. But as the world speculates on Charlotte's destiny, one question lingers in every royal watcher's mind. The military titles were just the first step. What if Charles' bold move wasn't just about tradition but succession itself? Could Princess Charlotte be quietly positioned not just as a figurehead, but as the future monarch in disguise? It's a question that no one inside the palace dares to answer aloud, but the clues are beginning to speak for themselves. In recent months, Charlotte's role within the royal machine has expanded far beyond what anyone anticipated. Ceremonial duties once reserved for senior royals have subtly been handed to her. Invitations to private audiences, discreet briefings, even moments of subtle prominence during public events have signaled a quiet recalibration of the royal spotlight. While the world remained fixated on the fraying tensions between William and Harry, Charlotte moved, almost unnoticed, into the empty spaces left by distraction and distrust. She wasn't just the king's granddaughter anymore. She was becoming something more, a symbol of what the monarchy could be, if carefully remolded by quieter hands. As Charles's public schedule shrinks, and his health remains the subject of speculation, the urgency behind recent decisions becomes harder to ignore. His presence, once steady if not always beloved, is beginning to fade from the center of royal gravity. In that absence, a vacuum emerges, one that William, fractured by internal strains, and Harry, distanced by self-exile, are seemingly unable or unwilling to fill. In that void, Charlotte's composure, her mystery, and her untarnished reputation shine with deliberate precision. Polls quietly reflect a growing affection for the young princess, one that transcends partisan lines within royal fandom. She carries no scandal, no factional alignment, only the potential to unify. And that potential, according to sources, has not gone unnoticed. Within the palace, whispers have grown louder. Advisors once focused solely on William's ascent are said to have begun preparing long-term contingency strategies, ones that place Charlotte in increasingly central roles not just publicly, but behind closed doors. Training has shifted. Briefings have deepened. Her presence in state planning meetings, though not officially confirmed, has been mentioned too many times to dismiss. One courtier, speaking anonymously, called it a slow coronation, a term that, once considered hyperbole, now hangs in the air with eerie weight. It doesn't mean William will be bypassed. It means the future could arrive earlier than expected, and Charlotte, unknowingly or not, may already be walking toward it. This is no longer about ceremonial titles. It's about succession wrapped in subtlety. A shift occurring not with proclamations and crowns, but with gestures and patterns. And while no official announcement has been made, no dramatic declarations offered, those watching closely see it happening piece by piece. Charles's final act may not be a farewell. It may be a handoff disguised as legacy preservation, a plan that trades confrontation for continuity, confusion for quiet control. And in that silence, a message emerges more clearly than any royal decree. The future has already begun writing itself, and the pen is now in Charlotte's hand. In a monarchy built on tradition, silence is often the loudest move, and Princess Charlotte has just become the loudest silence the palace has ever heard. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.